Today we are going to be discussing two very famous pieces of art. The first being the Lamentation over the Dead Christ by Rembrandt van Rijn, the second being the Statue of David by Michelangelo. Now, these two pieces of art are very different in a lot of ways, but also similar in ways that you wouldn't expect. The Lamentation over the Dead Christ was painted by Rembrandt in 1635. The style is Baroque, and it was made in the Dutch style in 1635. The medium is oil on canvas. The negative space that we see in the upper left corner draws the audience into the lower right corner, making it the focal point for the piece. The color is very dull and mainly neutral in order to add a somber and sadness to this piece. There is a pop of color in the red on the woman's head above the Christ. There are many values to be noticed on this piece, which helps the audience see the whole piece and allows their eyes to wander and really be able to take in all aspects of this art. Rembrandt was very strategic with his values and highlighted Christ, making him the centerpiece of the art. Chiaroscuro was commonly used throughout this piece. The texture that was added throughout the piece is also very strategic. We see the splintering wood surrounding Christ, as well as the softness and daintiness of the cloth he is laying on. Also, take into account the roughness and boniness we see throughout the body of Christ, and his bruised and rough-looking body, created by focusing on value and texture. We also see a softness in the woman's face above the Christ, which helps differentiate the textures and helps the audience see more of a rough texture and the suffering of the Christ. Christ is the emphasis of this piece, and this is highlighted by the bright colored cloth he is laying on, as well as the contrasting dull colored Christ taking up the middle of the piece, drawing the audience in. This piece personally makes me feel really sad and guilty. It makes me reflect on the way I personally have put Christ in this state, and it really helps me wrap my head around this historical event. This looks very somber and dull, but reflecting on the piece, it does excite me to think of seeing Jesus in heaven and understanding how much he did. I love this piece by Rembrandt because it helps me to wrap my head around the sacrifice that was made, as I previously stated. I also find peace in it. I would not display this piece in my home just because I think it would look out of place, but I would seek it out if I went to a museum or wanted to see it in another context. This piece was a very big success because all the emotion it evokes in its audience while having a main focal point but still taking the viewer's eyes through the whole piece. The historical context of this piece is very unique. Due to the different handling in its faces, it's believed Rembrandt's apprentices actually had a part in this piece. The Lamentation was a common topic to be painted because of how important this moment is to a lot of people. It is thought that this particular piece was used to give the audience something to reflect on and to help his apprentices. His apprentices were painting a very famous subject while also learning from a very successful artist, specifically in this subject matter, because Rembrandt was famous for painting the Lamentations. While this piece was being painted, it was known as the Golden Dutch Age. There was a rise of wealthy merchant class, so they would spend more money on art. Interestingly enough, John Ringling wife died in 1929, which was the year Ringling acquired this piece from Rembrandt. He seemed to throw himself into this collection according to the Tampa Bay Times, and that's how this piece is now viewable to students like me. This piece is also in the Baroque style. Some qualities most frequently associated with Baroque are grandeur, sensuousness, richness, drama, movement, tension, emotional exuberance, and a tendency to blur distinctions between various arts. The next piece that we're going to be discussing is Michelangelo's infamous Statue of David. So the piece that I showed you in the beginning was actually done, is a copy, and it was done in Italy, and this copy was made in the 1870s. They're really famous for making copies of statues of David so that other people can add them to their collection. This piece is not as large as the original dimensions of Michelangelo's Statue of David. It is about a foot, half a foot shorter. Michelangelo's David was in the style Italian Renaissance. This was both classical and Renaissance art focused on human beauty and nature. People, even when in religious works, were depicting life and showing emotion. The medium was marble sculpture, and the dimensions were 17 feet by 6.5 feet. Michelangelo created this sculpture in Florence, Italy, and it was made out of marble and is extremely large, as I previously mentioned. This piece is very symmetrical due to the natural semantics of a human, but also because it is purely a human statue with some small details added. There is good rhythm throughout this piece because of the textures Michelangelo added. Also, due to the style of the Italian Renaissance, there was a lot of focus on human and the natural beauty of it, and Michelangelo really wanted to emphasize that in his piece. We can see textures throughout David's hair that are very appealing to the eye, and also textures throughout his body to show his muscles. This is very consistent throughout the whole body, so there is good rhythm and flow. The proportions are so important in this piece because it is such a large work that without correct proportions, it would just look wonky and incorrect. We really see the skill of Michelangelo throughout this sculpture because of how correct and impressive human proportions are. We also see the impact of Greek and Roman art due to the proportions, as I previously mentioned. We can also argue that repetition is seen throughout the piece just because of the consistency of the muscles, and that creates a smooth rhythm. This piece makes me personally feel empowered because David was an underdog, and truly I'm just in awe of Michelangelo's talent. It's interesting to see how stories from the Bible were taken and made into these awesome art pieces at the time, and how popular they were and how much people desired to have these pieces. This statue was commissioned for the Cathedral of Florence and was intended to inspire and embody the city of Florence. It highlighted the strength and independence of this young city after they had just gotten out of conflict. Both of these art pieces are really interesting to compare and contrast to each other. We'll start with comparing them. These both have spiritual inspiration, so obviously Lamentation of Christ is of Jesus Christ, and the statue of David is of the story of David and Goliath. Both of these art pieces were also made in order to benefit someone besides the artist themselves. So as I previously mentioned with the Lamentation of Christ, this piece was made to help Rembrandt's apprentices learn how to paint and create this really important subject matter, and for Michelangelo, it was commissioned for the city of Florence. The emotion and proportion and tensions were both similar. So what I mean by that is both of these pieces wanted to really strike an emotion in their audience, and the human proportions were really important to nail, or at least get as close to perfection as they could, just because the people were the focal point of the piece. So to contrast, the mediums used, obviously one was a marble sculpture and one was a painting with oil on canvas. Also, the people who benefit from it, so as I previously said, one was apprentices versus a city, so that's different, and the styles. So the Lamentation of Christ really focused on that Baroque, emotional, dramatic style and wanted to create these deep emotions in their audience, where the statue of David, was just really focusing on those correct and accurate body proportions while creating this feeling of empowerment.